Benissimo. Allora, possiamo cominciare. Io sono molto contenta di ospitare stasera questa presentazione del volume Sacred Landscapes, curato dai miei due colleghi Ralph Häussler e Gianfranco Chiai. Continuo in lingua inglese. Good night, good evening, everybody. I'm very glad on behalf of Alteritas to host this book presentation on a theme of high interest for us, the sacred landscapes. The miscellany published in 2020, edited by Ralph Häussler and our associate Gianfranco Chiai, contains 33 chapters from the international and multidisciplinary group of scholars, which cover almost every aspect of this relevant topic of the ancient, as well also of the modern world. This features internationality and multidisciplinarity totally reflect our cross-cultural approach to scientific publication. So therefore, I give the floor to the editors, Ralph Häussler first, then Gianfranco Chiai will follow, introducing the discussant, Dr. Anca Dan of the CNRS Auroch Paris. Some of the contributors are also attending the Zoom meeting, and at the end of the presentation, some time will be left for discussion. So as you know, this meeting is reproduced in live streaming on the Facebook page of Alteritas. Persons who cannot join the Zoom conference are invited to post their questions on this page. We will read later the question to the participants. So enjoy the event. And please, Ralph, it's your.
Good. Okay, anyway, thank you so much first of all for how our things happening. So thank you all for so many of our authors who actually can join us today, wherever you are in the world. So as you just said, yes, it was a very multicultural event, multidisciplinary, very international, with people from so many countries. It's based on two conferences we organized in Lampeter some years ago. And it was just an amazing venue, really, to actually go and discuss sacred landscapes in such a context. I think it's really, as you can see, a very lovely small place in the middle of nowhere in Wales, middle of nowhere, excuse me, in West Wales, far away, no railway, nothing. And the first Sacred Landscapes conference was in 2014. It was a 3-day event. And I was just amazed about the number of people who actually joined us for those 3 days, who came from all over Europe and the States as well, to actually come to Lampeter, come to Wales and give papers. So it was an amazing event. There's such an exchange of ideas of so many people worked together before. So it's kind of interesting to see people who work on similar topics, whether it's in Italy or on China or on Iberia. So it was an amazing event. We did have a little excursion in the end of our day, just a few photos for those of you who came, just to remind us. It was actually a 3-day event. And we had a nice excursion to a nice medieval castle, Clan Stefan. Despite the rain, it was actually quite nice. I think you might recognize a few familiar faces here. Yes, so it was a lovely event, as Francisco Marco will also remember, so Gianfranco and Francesca and everybody else. So thank you all for coming. Oh, I should remind everybody that we did originally had a third co-organizer, Eleanor Betts from the Open University, but she wasn't actually involved in the publication of our proceedings. So this was our Lampeter event, 3 days. It was just amazing in 2014. And when we took the chance again in 2016 to organize another conference, 2016 was part of the Banya conference on Near Eastern archaeology. I can go back for a second here. So this was kind of, as it says, the sacred, excuse me, computer wants to do something what I don't want to do, on sacred nature, structuring the sacred, but just focusing on the Near East, part of the British Association of Near Eastern Studies. So this was just a 1-day event, but it was full of really amazing papers focusing on the Near East, like here, Christine Morris on the Minoan Peak sanctuaries, for example. It was a very intensive day, so much marvelous papers, really, so much discussion. It was just absolutely amazing. So those were our two conferences that we had in Lampeter. And then came the task of publishing it. And here, of course, I have to say, well, thank you to everybody who actually eventually sent us a paper. And it was possible to actually create this amazing volume, large formats here. Oxbow was a bit shocked at some stage, our publisher. So many thanks, of course, to our publisher, Oxford Books, for publishing this. So 33 papers, oh, hello, more than 500 pages. So it was quite an amazing event. So yes, so thanks to everybody from Europe and beyond who actually participated, who gave a paper, and whose paper is now published in our volume. So I think it's just, as you said, an amazing collection. It's so multidisciplinary. So I just want to say thank you for everything you've done. So yes, yeah, 33 papers. It's also about, I don't know, it's also about what, the same number of authors altogether, plus Gian Franco and me, of course. As you can see, it's so international. And I hope, well, the idea is really to carry on and perhaps have another conference session as well in the future. So the idea is really to work to go from there. I did actually put up a kind of because we've got a Sacred Landscapes Facebook group, which you can join. So far, nobody has really voted for like what would be the next topic, what should we be focusing on. So if you're interested, we should go and organize another event, perhaps a bit more focused on something particular. So those are the topics so far. As you can see, 4 votes so far is the most we got for any topic. So just let us know what you're really interested in. And I think, as we said, oh, it covers virtually everything, but actually we left out entire continents. So we left out North America, South America, Africa, and Australia. And I think it might actually help us to look at, kind of comparisons with other cultures outside Europe, Asia, and Egypt. So I think we should perhaps go and focus a bit more on invite people from other disciplines to join in the next Sacred Landscapes conference to look at, well, actually, it's very similar developments. So very often, as you can see here, wherever we are in the world, you might, whether it's in Africa or it's in South America or in Asia, very often, mountains are, of course, sacred for various reasons, and rivers. The only interesting thing, of course, is that in some cultures, those places are still considered like Mount Fuji or so on, Mount also in Japan, and can still kind of people engage. So what we're doing, so I hope it doesn't break off. I hope you can still see something. So the idea is really kind of, let's go and expand to other regions and also look at how people nowadays are still engaging with sacred mountains, so from a more anthropological or ethnographic experience, or how to engage with like a sacred tree. I think very often what we're doing is very kind of theoretical. We're looking at some things which are like gone like 2000 years ago. So let's go and perhaps put a bit more ideas in of how do people really engage with nature, with their landscape, with their surrounding nowadays. And you've got lots of living examples. So that's really all I want to say. So many thanks to all of you really who was involved in the 2 conferences. Many thanks to everybody who wrote a paper. I think you are really the ones who made this book what it is. So yes, so thank you so much. And if you've got an idea about what we should talk about in our next conference, now of course we could, well, perhaps we can do it in person again, hopefully in a few months, once we all got our vaccinations, and can actually go and have another nice meeting and talk about Sacred Landscapes again in the near future. So yes, thank you very much. Yes, that's all I really wanted to say. Yes, I don't know, this is what I was told to say.
Please, Gian Franco, is your floor.
Yes, thank you very much for Chiai this wonderful event, and I have the pleasure and the honor to present you. Can you hear me? Sorry. To present you Anca Dan. Who is Anca Dan? Anca Dan is a beautiful person, one of my best friends, but first of all, she's an outstanding researcher in the field of ancient geography and ethnography. Anca Dan studied classics, the Faculty of Humanities Science in Bucharest. She studied ancient history, classical philology, and classical archaeology. After her master in Bucharest, she moved to Paris, and she studied at the University of Paris, La Sorbonne, classics. 2009, her wonderful PhD, unfortunately unpublished. The title, La plus merveilleuse des mers, recherche sur la représentation de la mer Noire et de ce peuple dans les sources antiques d'Homère et d'Eratosthène. Her wonderful PhD focused on the representation of ancient people who lived in the territory around the the Black Sea. 2009 until 2018, she was a research fellow at Berlin in frame of the Excellence Cluster Topoi. And she worked in Berlin. We worked together in many projects. And since 2012, is Anca research professor the prestigious French institution of CNR. The main research field of Anca Dan is the ancient geography and the representation of ancient people in the ancient and Greek and Latin sources. Anca is very, very impressive. She speaks fluently Italian, like native speaker, English, French, Russian, and very, very good German. Anca, thank you for coming, really. I very, very appreciate
Thank you, Gianfranco. It is much too kind, and please don't, it is much too kind, this invitation. And in fact, I'm extremely excited and overwhelmed by your work, by your book, so that I have in electronic format, so I cannot show it to you, but I must say that I read it with the greatest interest and really use it and advise it to everybody to read and to use, because so I think it's a landmark in the bibliography about the sacred spaces, which comes at a moment when the spatial turn is at its strongest, so to say. Many people get interested in space. Many people want to do interdisciplinary research on spaces, and especially in sacred spaces, with some changes in the last decades. Things are getting more precise, and your book is coming to the right point. So what I would like to say, because I would not like to repeat things which are on the book, and I really invite people to read the book, I would like to just to say very briefly how I am using your book and what your book brought to me. So it's a small example, a very modest example, so to say, about using your book in research. I must say from the beginning that when I saw the content of the book, I thought to myself, I'm really happy not to have been the editor of this book. Really, I think you did. It's excellent that you brought together so many people covering more than 5 millennia. From Britain to China and from Egypt and Nubia up to Britain again and over the Greek and Roman world, of course. And you brought together people who are archaeologists, who are historians, who are philologists, people who discuss only authors and people who discuss only places or people who discuss rituals and all kinds of objects. So your task was extremely difficult, I think, not only to get together a paper, but just to transform all this material, which is of course wonderful, and each paper in its own, I think it brings an important contribution. But making this collection of book would have been, for me, to be honest, impossible. And I think you managed to do it. And you suggest a very clever and very fine way to go through this labyrinthic, conglomerate. It's not a nebulous. It's not just a collection of folders that you offer to the reader, but you offer your own reading. And your reading, it's coming first with the introduction, which has already after Christopher Telly. So you make the main, you give the main references, you indicate that you have an idea, and your idea is really what makes the new basis, I think, in the study of sacred spaces. But then you guide the lecturer through this accumulation of, once again, excellent papers, but really, really difficult to make a book out of it. So I have just a small PowerPoint in order to show you what were my questions, and then to conclude on how your book helped me and offer food for thought, not only for the content, but also for the format and for your invitation to read the really bibliotheque. It would be like a literary genre, isn't it? This accumulation of different things, but which is organized thanks to you, the editors. So I will try to share my my screen. One moment, please. Okay. So I could not have the cover of your paper. It's just the image I found on the internet. But of course, when we are talking about sacred spaces, so because I'm coming from Eastern Europe, I remember that since I was a child walking on the streets and at crossroads, we always have crosses and small chapels, and this is something which exists also in Italy, and I think Gianfranco and the Italian colleagues are sensitive to this, but a lot in Greece, and this is a Greek example I have here. So to all the good spirits and so on. And of course, in something like a romantic interpretation, one would think that these are traces from, the beginning of history. People were always sensitive to the manifestation of the sacred, of the holiness in some particular places, being it so natural, exceptional natural features like mountain peaks or like rivers, or crossing of roads, so places which are made out of natural features, but also of human practice. And of course, this is still an open question, even if we know now that we don't have to make mixtures between what it was before Christianity, before monotheism, and what it was before. We pass now this romantic age of imagining the holiness of nature in general. Still, these features are interesting, and it's worth the pain to look in detail and to understand the phenomena and what is happening there. Why some places are sacred, and which are these places, and who consider them sacred, and how this survives, how this expressed in different times. And this is the huge topic for which your book offers now one of the most complete and well organized, despite the variety, collection of studies and food for thought. Since I'm coming from Romania, you know, we have a word, a proverb, so to say, in Romanian, which is omul sfințește locul. So the man makes sacred the space, the place. And I was curious to find out where this expression is coming from. And in fact, we have it in French and English. And I could not resist the pleasure to quote here an English poet who wrote in French. So, en faisant lieu, mais lieu par droit, ne faisant homme à nul endroit. And found out that this, tradition about the man who is capable to construct a sacred space or to sanctify the place goes back to Plutarch, and we have the Greek text here. And of course, it was taken over and over in the Greek tradition. So it is the man who makes the holiness of the place, or it is the man, how says the Latin, and it is a fragment of Latin comedy quoted by the grammarian Carisius, homo locum ornat non hominem locus. So it is the man who gives the sanctity of the place. What I think is even more interesting with this expression is that it was taken over from Greek, most probably also in the Judaic tradition. So in the Talmud of Babylon, we have exactly the same expression, that it is the man who makes holy place. Of course, in the Greek mentality, this has to do with the man, which since Protagoras, isn't it, is the measure of all the things. And in order to understand nature, one has to relate it to man. And for us who study ancient geography, like Gian Franco and many other authors, here it is a space which becomes a space to be explained and to be put into maps and to be represented only in relationship with man. It is easy to see this when one look at maps or topographic or chorographic representations of antiquity. We don't have in antiquity, and we seldom have, even in early modern times, maps which are representing an objective space. No? The space which deserves to be told, to be represented, it's a space where the humans and the gods, but the gods through the humans are present. So this is what gives meaning to a space. And I put here, so the Palestrina mosaic, you know, so in order to show you that the space of this branch of the Nile River in the Nile Delta, it is represented because the people are there and they are making a religious celebration. Or this map of the Black Sea, which is represented with the ships, with the people. So we don't have objective space represented as such. Until the 18th century, we always have a human space. And the space is, of course, oikumene, the space which is inhabited by the human. I think this has to do with the conception of Greek conception of space, which is not a pure content, but it's a content which is in something like which is in dialogue, in a resonance with the people who inhabit this place. So the place, you know, in Aristotelian concept, it's the topos, which adheres. So it's a form which adheres to the content. And this particularity of the Greek thinking about space, which is not, once again, the objective space that we learned from Newton onwards, and we learned it in school because it's the modern objective space we have today. It's a different, this different opinion to see the space as a kind of matrix, as a kind of, form which gives what is inside, which gives the people and us, who are inside. So this conception allows us also to explain the creation of landscape in antiquity and the invention of the landscape in the Greek and Roman world, especially at the end of the Hellenistic time, because we have a space which, again, it's populated, has people inside, and these people are exactly like the space which surrounds them. So there is a synthesis, there is a coherence in the perception of the space. A space cannot exist outside the, or it's not interesting to be represented outside the human being, and of course of the holiness which is brought by the humans, which manifest themselves through the humans. And with this, we come, of course, to what was the starting point, in fact, of your reflections and what was before you with Christopher Telly in the archaeology of the sacred spaces, with this phenomenological perception of spaces. In order to understand sacred spaces, one must do or take something from the phenomenologist. Of course, I don't speak about just general words, but one has to understand that is the relationship between the human being and the surrounding space, which can explain how place is sacred, of course, because, and I'm quoting here a passage I like very much, because Maurice Merleau-Ponty, it's a lot of text to be read, but I think Simone de Beauvoir made a very nice abstracts explaining that the space where we are and where our objects are is not something abstract. It's not coming from outside, different from us. Our perception of the space express the way in which we represent ourselves and we put ourselves towards this space, and in which we relate to other people and to the objects. And this space which is around us, it's in fact an image of our life. And this phenomenological thinking was used in a geographical geographical studies in the French literature, especially by Jean-Marc Bessa, and who explains that, of course, the places are not only you see, si on comprend les lieux, the places are nothing else but the whole actions and events which form these places. Because what people do, of course, and what people feel, what people represent, this is what nourishes and this is what creates the places around. The place is not something objective and, matière, something outside the objectified existence outside the human being, but it is matière, materials full of signification, full of the whole history which made it. And with these things in mind, with this phenomenological perception of the place, I'm coming to the idea of sacred place. So what is the sacred place in ancient traditions? It's of course the place where the divinity manifested itself. So a place is not sacred. We don't adore a place because the place itself is a god, of course, as you give examples from all the regions, but because a god expressed, appeared there, made something there, okay? And it's then we have, after this manifestation of the holy, the hieron, maybe or not the consecration, so the sacrum, the sanctum and the sacrum, with the difference in the Latin language, and then the further steps, so the frequentation, the recognition of the place, the frequentation, the monumentalization, the description, and the transformation, and finally, in some cases, the abandonment of the place. So here is where I'm coming exactly to your book in order to very briefly explain how this helps me. So I was very, once again, very puzzled by the diversity of your of the people who answered your invitations, and I think this is very positive. I learned a huge amount of things from all these papers, but just to be fair to everybody, I would like just to focus here on the way you try to organize these huge materials, which one more time goes through five millennia, if I so well, from ancient Egypt and Assyrians to 19th century Nubia. So we are starting with Egypt and finishing with Egypt. And in all the geographical directions. So I appreciated that you did not simply put these papers chronologically, as for example, I would have been tempted to do because I would have get lost in all this diversity. But you mixed the regions and you mixed the times in all the chapters, and you have a section, so to say. You have 5 sections after your introductions, and that I would recommend to any student, in our universities. Your introduction, I think it's what shows the basis of what must be thought and on what bibliography it should be thought from now on the sacred spaces. It is really this function of landmark and of basis I would like to emphasize in your introduction. But then the road you suggest in this labyrinth, so manipulation of sacred spaces, monumentalizing natural features. So you start in a way with the archaeology, with what is seen. I appreciate to start with Diana Nemorensis, of course, one of the most important places for Roman historians and in Italy. So you start mostly with archaeology, then you follow with the transformation of sacred landscape, the transformation of these points with what is seen in archaeology or what cannot be always seen, because the rituals and what we know about rituals, it's always very complicated to see. So going through Crete with Knossos and other mountains with Cyprus, but then just to Lusitania and to Britain. And then back to Greece and finally arriving into Galicia. So let's say 2 archaeological parts, more archaeological parts, then followed by the literary parts with the myth and memory. So the landscape investing with meaning. And there I recognize in this part the interest of Gian Franco, of course, so epigraphy and in relationship with geography, with Phrygia, and then analogous papers about Greece, Arcadia, and combined with literary text like Greek drama or Greek novel. Then in the 4th place comes something which has only two papers, Experiences Sacred Landscape. I was wondering, to be honest, why you decided to make a section only of 2 papers. Maybe you would like to comment on that and on all these difficulties and on your thoughts you have in order to put this together. But I like to stop there in this itinerary of yours. So after seeing the monument, after understanding how the monument worked and transformed, after hearing about the myths and the traditions from texts about these monuments, I want to take my breath and to experience the sacred landscapes, especially that because this brought us to China, so it was very exotic for me. And you finish, as I like it very much, on going farther. So we feel at the end of this periplus that we advanced in the thinking about the sacred space, because you show how communities, how societies are formed around the sacred spaces. And I think this is something which is a hot topic and a topic about of which we still need, which is of interest today, of course, when we debate about the relationship between different religions, of course, especially in France or in the Western society. So the sacred space as a place where an ethnos gets formed, in relationship with which ethnos get formed, or some other kind of community. So this is the content of your book with the 32 papers, I have several questions, so to say, because once again, I don't know if it is it's just an invitation to read the book, but if it is interesting to enter into further details. My questions would be, about your thoughts about organizing this material, about what you think about the reconstruction and the perception of sacred spaces when we have to deal with different kind of traces which are part of them visible in text and archaeology and part of them totally invisible. And a big question maybe because you are asking for topics for workshops, it would be the relationship between polytheism and monotheism, because your papers have a huge diversity. They cover different polytheism, they cover societies which are in contact, acculturating in transferal contacts. But how do you deal with the relationship with monotheism? So how do you look at sacred spaces when polytheism left the place to monotheism, be it in Europe or in America or in Asia? So I don't know what you think, if you would like to have something like a dialogue or...
Well, I can certainly say something. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can certainly say something about the structure of those are more or less the topics of our first conference for our call of papers. So we just thought really, Gianfranco and I think it makes more sense to have as you said, I think you can put it like many German collected volumes, you just put the authors in alphabetical order. But then I don't think this is very meaningful. Also chronological order, I don't think it's very meaningful, or just geographical. So the idea was really to show that, we've got certain main themes, and let's go and put a number of papers from different regions. They are fitting, or people actually originally, of course, responded to the call of papers to say, well, my paper is on manipulation or on myth or on experience. Hence, I think it's a good idea to have different papers from like Italy and Iberia and China or Dacia, and we all are like in one chapter to different periods, different ideas. So the reader can actually go and see the similar kind of topic from very different angles and disciplines. And at the same time, of course, yes, there is, of course, an overlap. This is obvious. There must always be an overlap. So something like experience crops up in many, many other papers. Also, myth might be mentioned somewhere else, and identity. But you have to make a decision, okay, this paper is mainly about that topic. And there are only two papers who really focus only on experiencing the sacred landscapes. There were more papers at the conference, but we haven't actually got all the papers of those two conferences. So some people just never submitted a paper. Hence, there are certain gaps, or some people did take a very long time to actually submit anything. So, but eventually it's all done, and I think it makes sense as it is. But yes, I think the idea is really to focus on certain topics and really show that this is meant to be in a diachronic perspective. It's meant to be more looking from very different regions to really give people the idea that the different methodologies, how people are actually working with this at the time. And I think we have moved on since. So this was the first major conference on sacred landscapes. So I think we have moved on also in how we would approach the topic. That's why I think our next conference would go beyond this. Does this answer some of your questions?
We can probably stop with the presentation and let's begin the discussion. If questions are from authors, from attendants on internet, on the Facebook, I don't see at the moment any comment, any questions. So please. Are there any questions? I wonder if I can start with a question of mine. I was very interesting in reading the introduction about the concept of Taskscape, which is innovative, I think, in many under many aspects. Could you tell us something about this?
Well, I think it was actually one of our contributors who actually introduced this for the first time. I think it was both. Was it Katharina? I think Gianfranco. Was it Katharina Zinn who actually mentioned this for the first time? So we took it up in our introduction to think about the Taskscape. So what people are actually doing. I think I always focus on social agency. That's very important for me. So that you always focus on the social agent, what is the individual actually doing. I think that's for me always a very important aspect. Hence, it makes sense to look at the context of, yes, the landscape, the activities, to look at what kind of tasks are performed in certain places, how people approach a certain topic. So it relates to my concept of social agency quite well. That's why I thought it actually makes a good combination.
Thank you.
But Gianfranco could also reply, I suppose. Yes.
Please, some other question, discussion? Please, Lucia, unmute yourself. Okay.
No question, but just a comment about what I appreciate very much in Lampeter a few years ago. Because probably I was the only person from the Bronze Age. I remember that I was quite isolated, like chronology at least. And what I liked very much was the free space of discussion. The fact that there were not groups, theories, models to be followed, but everything was completely open. And this is a very special thing that is not so often anymore in our congresses, especially in the Bronze Age congresses, that are a bit all in the same direction. And so I really hope that in the future, the next Sacred Landscape conference will have a small space also for Bronze Age, because I would like very much to participate.
No, absolutely. I think the idea was, in a way, to have a kind of brainstorming conference where you exchange ideas, you talk about methodology. And I think we had really good discussions, even though people came from so many different disciplines and they never actually engaged with each other before. That's what I thought. It was actually a really good event, because even like somebody from the Bronze Age or Neolithic or China can ask questions about like Roman practice, or vice versa. So I thought it was really the idea. We just want to exchange ideas. We want to get to understand better how people work in different periods, how they interpret the evidence. And I thought this is the idea really of a conference: exchange ideas. Don't just present what you're doing, but actually enter into a dialogue. And I think it worked quite well. Yeah, so thank you. Yes. We have to organize the next conference soon. Yes. It's overdue.
Probably in China.
Yes, but we can't do it in China. We want to exchange ideas, and we want to open up.
Very open-minded word. Yes.
Yes. Any more thoughts, ideas, memories? Yes.
Hello, Ralph. Hi, Gianfranco. Since you mentioned memories, I'll just steal a few minutes, really just to thank both of you for having had me way back in 2014 in Lampeter. If it makes any sense to you, I will keep you guys in my heart. I think Lampeter was perhaps one of the first conferences I did in my academic career. And this tonight is probably the last one, since as you said, many of us have moved on. I moved on to teaching high school, actually. So I'm here perhaps living the imposter syndrome of the academia. But I really wanted to thank both of you for the opportunity, both of participating in the conference and publishing the volume, which is really wonderful to have in my library. Apart from the thanks and the personal note, which I like to share with you, the way you did organize the material really opens up the discipline, in my view. For as little as I know of the discipline now, because I've been teaching since 3 years or over 3 years in school. But when we attended the conference, the feeling I had is that we were looking into subject-specific conferences, and the way the material is organized now, it looks more appropriate rather than for archaeology or ancient history, for something more in the field of anthropology, which says something of, I think, says something of what we experience when we approach sacred places. Even just like the small photo of the shrine on the roadside shrine that Anca was showing us. There's something that is enchanting or charming of a sacred space, and always one wonders what's making it sacred. We all know it's just a tree, or we all know it's just an island. But the way you put the material together really does point us in the direction of anthropology, I think. Hence, perhaps anthropology being, rather than anthropology, an ancillary discipline to history, we're perhaps turning the two disciplines around. It's as though history and archaeology are working as ancillary disciplines to anthropology, or even psychology for the matter. In fact, next conference, I'll obviously miss it because I'll be in school, but you might want to consider an anthropologist or a psychologist, in my view.
Please don't say no.
Franco?
I will say, please don't say no.
Well, I think anthropology, I think, is important. I think even people like Costelli, obviously, they are, in a way, both archaeologists and anthropologists. So it's like, so it's very important to get the archaeology in. And I think the psychology is something I always think is important. How do you actually experience such a place? So hence, it's good to actually, get modern data to just open up our ideas of what we can do, what are the possibilities. You can't just say, oh, this is how people experience a certain site nowadays from a psychological perspective. But I think it might give you food for thought of what might have happened in ancient times. So I always think about, polytheism. You talked about monotheism and polytheism earlier. And I know there's a certain school who kind of says, oh, yes, polytheism, it's all very kind of orthopractic. People don't really believe in those things, But when you look at countries like India or Japan, where you can say, well, it's really in-depth belief in a way. It's like what they are doing, how they are engaging, despite having so many thousands of gods doing all these rituals. There is so much faith in their religion. So that we get the idea of, yes, how do people actually approach, how do we understand, oh, there is a sacred tree, a sacred mountain. What are we doing? Where are we doing the worship? I think my problem is, but there is a certain school which we get, among others, we get it in France. Again, there was a certain kind of pragmatic view which goes and says, oh, well, you've got the local elites, they're just appropriating like a hilltop site, put a temple there to dominate the local population. And I think, well, it only works if this was already a sacred site before. And now they're going to dominate it. But there is this very kind of pragmatic approach, especially from some French colleagues, where sometimes I just wonder, it's like, why? It's like, if you look around the world and you can see just like so many examples in the world where people are worshipping stones and trees and rivers, and they engage with them, and they are really, and I think this is why we might want to really broaden up and think more about having more communication between archaeologists, ancient historians, classicists on one hand, Egyptologists, of course, but also on the other hand, getting anthropologists, psychologists, people from modern religions also kind of engaged. It would make a good research project, really, with like a regular conference or workshop, if we had some money.
It is always difficult, so it's about demolishing the construct, the most important construct of all. One of my compatriots, isn't it, Mircea Eliade, the sacrum. So I am afraid that, of course, it is already in the bibliography lately that there is no such a, monolithic sacrum, as Eliade thought that it could be expressed and deployed in different cultures and times. And I think your book already shows the many faces and the manifestations and the variety, and gives food for thought one more time. But I think as you think it would be a more even a more organized deconstruction of the Eliade Sacrum.
Yes, no, thank you. Yeah.
If I may, the approach you talk about, Ralph, from my perspective, who I've been out of academia, it might also serve to bring the study of antiquity or archaeology or classics closer to what might interest the broader public. Because when I have kids at school, for them it's normal to look at a church in the street or to see, we study, the usual history of religions and so on, and it all looks fine. And then when you talk about ancient history, they look at our Greeks or Romans or Minoans as very strange people, and they wonder why are they behaving in such a strange way. But this approach that you propose, Ralph, brings these two perceptions together. It helps make sense of the past and kind of does show the utility of doing ancient history. Even to the kids that I teach to.
I think it's the same for everybody. I think if you teach at university, I think many students today, you need to get them some kind of, whatever you do, ancient history, archaeology, understanding of why is this still relevant for our world today. I think that's quite important, I think. So, yes.
I can say something about this multidisciplinary conferences, meetings. We are used, as Alteritas group, we are used to do that from 10 years ago. So since we were founded, I think it is very important to remove barriers among disciplines, because we are often in the prejudice of the superiority of a discipline in respect to the other. So the archaeologist thinks, it is my view, my experience, that is the first eye, and the linguist who thinks, no, the language has its own relevance in studying peoples. Without descriptions, you wouldn't understand anything about what you are seeing. And these meetings help, really, and people are very interesting in knowing the view of the other. And because it is always an enrichment of my own perspective, my own scientific approach. So thank you very much for this very, is a very interesting, but also a paradigmatic and an example to follow for further. We can do something together, of course. And so thank you very much. I don't see any questions, but please, we have still time. If you want to discuss further, we are available, and we don't have persons who disturb. So these hecklers, what's the name in English? Hecklers. Tepisti, hooligans. It is the first time I see something like that. I was really impressed. How is it possible? It is the risk to let the link run over the internet many days before the event. That's the question. And we learned once more that we have to be careful. So.
We're going to have to go now, but thank you all very much indeed, and particularly Ralph and Franco and all the organisers, and hopefully we'll meet again.
Yes,
thank
hopefully.
you.
Yes, no, thanks very much, Gil. Yes.
Thank you, Ralph.
Take care. See you then. Bye.
Bye-bye.
If I can do this.
Well, I want to congratulate very heartfully, Ralph and
No, you're mute, Paco.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
No, I want to congratulate very heartfully Ralph and Gianfranco, because they organized a wonderful congress, wonderful conference in Lampeter, two different some years ago. And I think there is a before and after in the studies of territories and landscapes, because the great merit of the organizers, the openness of the scope, the openness and methodologies. Simone Marchesini has very rightly said that there is the convergence between the different disciplines, ancient history, philology, archaeology, but from my point of view, anthropology or the cognitive approaches are included also in this approach. So I think this it has been a great merit with a great result of this initiative, and I want to thank very much Ralph and Gianfranco for all their patience in keeping in touch all together, because the result has been splendid. I always remember the happy days in Lampeter, including the great food in, was it called the Green Castle, Ralph?
Oh yes, the Green Castle. Yes.
Green Castle, yes.
Yes, it was one. Yeah.
With the pop music.
Yes.
And the landlady.
But it was nice food. It was nice. Yes.
So thank you very much for all, because you have made a great work. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Paco. That's great. Thank you.
We cannot forget ethnography and ethnology. Among the disciplines we have quoted, that's very important. So the ethnographical approach, similarities in diversities.
Yeah. When I was talking of anthropology, I was thinking of ethnology and ethnography, because
yes, but also anthropology.
In the French speaking or in the French world,
yes.
Used to maintain more these disciplines than in the Anglo-Saxon one. Yes.
So thank you. I see I can stop the Facebook